I'm going to speak normal French, okay? I want you to try to understand it, and then I'm going to reveal something that's going to make you absolutely furious. T'as vu ce truc avec les meufs dans la manif? Les flics étaient complètement à l'ouest, c'était le bordel, je te jure. If you understood something like 20%, congratulations, you're normal. But here is what's going to make you angry. You've been studying French for years, maybe decades. You can read articles from Le Monde, you know your conjugations of le subjonctif, you've memorized thousands of vocabulary words like amertume and proliférer, and yet you just heard a regular French person say something completely usual in everyday conversation, and you understood almost nothing. Now, what's the purpose of a French class? To learn real French, right? Wrong. Going through the manual becomes the real purpose. Finishing with a good grade was the objective. Grammar rules became math and vocabulary poetry. Just memorizing them was the goal. But what about speaking? Having a basic conversation with a French person? This is indeed the hardest part of any language learning. I get it. But why wasn't this the end goal of your French class? Let me translate what you heard earlier. Did you see that thing with the girls at the protest? The cops were totally out of it. It was a complete mess, I swear. Now, here is what your textbook would have taught you. Avez-vous vu ce qui s'est passé avec les jeunes femmes lors de la manifestation? Les policiers étaient totalement dépassés. C'était le chaos, je vous assure. Listen to the difference. T'as vu ce truc avec les meufs dans la manif? Les flics étaient complètement à l'ouest, c'était le bordel, je te jure. Avez-vous vu ce qui s'est passé avec les jeunes femmes lors de la manifestation? Les policiers étaient totalement dépassés, c'était le chaos, je vous assure. They're not even the same language. The system taught you words like une jeune fille, un policier, or dépassé, while French people would often say une meuf, un flic, or complètement à l'ouest. 70% of the words in that conversation were never in your textbook. 70%. This isn't just vocabulary. The French education system has been teaching you correct official French. It's the one that you would find in serious publications, official speeches, and French exams, including the immigration exams to France. It's how we think you're supposed to write according to the official textbooks. But that's not how real French people talk in everyday life at all. Let me prove this with more examples. I'm going to show you real French conversations and then what your program taught you to say. Je suis fatiguée de mon travail, j'ai envie d'abandonner. J'en ai marre de ce boulot, j'ai envie de tout plaquer. Connais-tu la situation de Marc? Sa partenaire l'a quitté. T'es au courant pour Marc? Il s'est fait larguer par sa copine. Ce plat est vraiment délicieux, je vous remercie. C'est super bon, merci. You see what's happening? The curriculum gave you a version of French that exists, but mainly in written French textbooks and newspapers. That's useful, that's good, but that's skipping over the actual everyday language of 67 million French people talking to each other and probably with you as well. This is why you can't understand French movies. For instance, here's a short clip from popular French movie Le règne animal.
T'as vu le retard qu'on a déjà?
Je t'avais dit que j'avais un truc à faire aujourd'hui.
Quel truc? Jouer à la console avec tes deux potes débiles?
Écoute, je t'avais dit que j'étais pas obligé de venir.
How much did you understand? Not much? Here's what they said line by line.
T'as vu le retard qu'on a déjà?
T'as vu le retard qu'on a déjà? This means, have you seen how late we already are? T'as vu le retard qu'on a déjà?
Je t'avais dit que j'avais un truc à faire aujourd'hui.
Je t'avais dit que j'avais un truc à faire aujourd'hui. I told you I had something to do today. Je t'avais dit que j'avais un truc à faire aujourd'hui.
Quel truc? Jouer à la console avec tes deux potes débiles?
Quel truc? Jouer à la console avec tes deux potes débiles? What thing? Playing video games with your two idiot buddies? Quel truc? Jouer à la console avec tes deux potes débiles?
Écoute, t'avais dit que j'étais pas obligé de venir.
T'avais dit que j'étais pas obligé de venir. You said I didn't have to come. T'avais dit que j'étais pas obligé de venir. That's not the correct official French of school, and it's not how we would even write it, but that's what they're actually saying and how French people speak in everyday life. Meanwhile, the correct official French version would be something like As-tu vu à quel point nous sommes déjà en retard? Je t'avais dit que j'avais quelque chose à faire aujourd'hui. Quelle chose devais-tu faire? Est-ce que tu devais jouer à des jeux vidéo avec tes deux amis idiots? Tu m'avais pourtant dit que je n'étais pas obligé de venir. That would be correct French and people would understand you. That would be okay. But it would sound a lot more formal than necessary.
T'as vu le retard qu'on a déjà?
Je t'avais dit que j'avais un truc à faire aujourd'hui.
Quel truc? Jouer à la console avec tes deux potes débiles?
Écoute, t'avais dit que j'étais pas obligé de venir.
The movie version sounds human. The textbook version sounds like people making an effort to sound way more formal than us, almost like making fun of their own characters. You don't have to sound like a textbook. But here is the thing. Your teacher probably knew this gap existed. Many teachers know French really well and they're aware that the curriculum that they're required to follow doesn't match how French people actually speak. But they're stuck anyway. They have to follow the program, pass students based on official French, and prepare them for standardized tests that don't measure real communication ability. You will need to learn the real informal French that people actually use on your own outside of school. Why does this happen? Why are teachers trapped in this approach? Well, it's about grading mostly. Official written French has a correct answer that you can look up in the textbooks. And that's quite useful. That's okay if you're passing exams. The education system loves it when there is some way to know when an answer is right or wrong. On the other hand, spoken French can be a moving target. Some words can quickly become uncool or offensive depending on the context, and sometimes they sound weird when they're not used by the right person. Like, how would your kids or grandkids react if you taught them slang from your own youth? And that's why your school lessons end up being about official written French. It's easier to grade vocabulary lists than cultural communication patterns. It's easier to measure textbook comprehension than movie understanding. There's some real benefits to that, and I'm okay with it, especially if you really learn correct written French along the way. All these rules are really good to know. Then later, with me, for example, you can switch to learning the French that you need to actually speak with real people, French people. In the meantime, both you and your teacher were stuck in the system. What the curriculum calls proper French is only one part of real everyday spoken French. There's a lot more to how French people actually communicate in real life. I'm thinking of words like un pote instead of un ami for a friend, bosser or taffer instead of travailler for to work, un gamin for un enfant, a kid, and that's not new slang at all, capter for comprendre, which means to understand, or even un truc for quelque chose, that's something. These are not youth French words, they're not offensive words, they're not even slang words, they're the normal words that French people use every day in normal situations. You're not going to offend anyone by using them. To be clear, we still use the correct words a lot, even in everyday spoken French. The vocabulary that you learned at school is probably really good. You shouldn't use these informal words too much, and you especially shouldn't use them in a French exam. Be careful with that. But all French people will drop informal words like these in their everyday life. Like, j'ai acheté un truc pour l'anniversaire de ma pote. I bought something for my friend's birthday. J'ai acheté un truc pour l'anniversaire de ma pote. That's great. Or, elle bosse au centre avec des gamins, je crois. She works at the center with kids, I think. Elle bosse au centre avec des gamins, je crois. That's really good French. But the school curriculum labeled all these everyday words as informal and sometimes incorrect and told teachers to avoid it. So you got locked out of half of French vocabulary, leaving this giant gap at the middle of your French comprehension. The French that you learned in school doesn't simply skip and miss some vocabulary. It also gave you a wrong idea of French pronunciation. You're taught to pronounce your words clearly and carefully, often more clearly than French people actually speak. That's a great way to be understood by the class and to check that the student actually knows what they're saying. That's okay in class. But again, that's not how French people actually speak. For instance, teacher will ask you to say je ne sais pas with 4 distinct syllables. That's great for the classroom. But in everyday speak, French people usually say je sais pas or je sais pas, just 2 syllables. Same with il n'y a pas de problème, taught as 7 syllables. Il n'y a pas de problème. Okay, good for the classroom again. In real life, people say y a pas de problème or even pas de problème. Or to take something we've seen today, they would ask you to say tu avais dit que je n'étais pas obligé de venir. You told me I didn't have to come with all the letters and the ne for the negation. That's perfect. When in real everyday spoken French, it would sound like
Écoute, je t'avais dit, j'étais pas obligé de venir.
You see, it's so different. The curriculum often treats these natural reductions as mistakes. Students get corrected for speaking the way French people actually speak just because it doesn't match the textbook. It's like saying I'm gonna go in English class instead of saying I am going to go. It's not the correct official grammar, but you have to know what it means if you want real conversations in English. You've invested years into a system that frankly gave you an incomplete map and it didn't make you understand the full picture. But here is the good news. It wasn't your fault or even your teacher's fault, and it's not too late to fix it. Your foundation in correct French is truly valuable. We just need to build the rest of the house on top of that. To do that, you need the chapters that your textbook left out. That's why I put them together for you in a personalized weekly action plan, which is free to download. I designed it to help you quickly bridge the gap between the formal French that you know and the real everyday French you need. It will force you to build a clear step-by-step plan to finally understand movies, participate in conversations, and feel the joy of connecting with the language, not just conjugating it. To get your free missing manual and start completing your French education, click the first link in the description. What about the grammar, you would say? Let's look at the specific rules you were taught that we need to adapt for the real world. Grammar is really the main difference between correct written French and real everyday French. All these pointy grammar rules get sanded down when we speak fast and freely. So, your teacher would make you learn the formal question structures like que voulez-vous for what do you want? Que voulez-vous? Remember this from school? But that would sound way too formal when speaking. Instead, French people would rather ask vous voulez quoi? You want what, literally? Or tu veux quoi? With friends, of course. Similarly, the textbook would show you formal negations. Remember? Je ne veux pas venir. I don't want to come. Je ne veux pas venir. But French people would say je peux pas venir. We almost always cut this ne in real spoken French. Je veux pas venir. Je veux pas venir. And finally, the system tried to make you understand the different rules about le participe passé or le subjonctif. And that's good to know. But even French people often make mistakes about that. Meanwhile, you will never learn about essential everyday expressions like j'en ai marre, I'm fed up, j'en ai marre. Or je m'en fous, I don't care. Or t'inquiète, t'inquiète for don't worry about it. Unfortunately, your teacher had to prioritize correct grammar over practical communication. This system turned French into a math problem instead of helping you actually talk to people. Most French programs teach you vocabulary and grammar, but skip over how real conversations actually work. Students learn how to build perfect sentences, but not how to jump into a conversation, hold the floor, and sound natural when reacting to something. Real spoken French relies on rhythm, interaction, and tone. That means interruptions and reactions. For example, non mais for no but wait, or bah for well, or justement. Yeah, that's why. Filler words as well. For bon for alright or well, bon. Tu vois? For you see or you know, tu vois? Or voilà, for that's it, or yeah, voilà. You also have emphasis words, really useful, like carrément, grave, or trop. That's informal for exactly or a lot. Textbook dialogues are often clean and polite, but actual French is full of hesitation, overlap, and sudden shifts in tone, just like in English. It's common to cut people off or to start a sentence and change direction halfway through. That's not bad French, it's fluent French. The curriculum taught students how to be correct, but it didn't show you how to sound alive. Here's why French teachers couldn't fix this, even if they wanted to. The tests. Standardized French exams measure grammar accuracy, so that's formal rules, vocabulary recognition, that's textbook words, reading comprehension of formal texts, writing ability for correct French style, but they don't measure conversation ability, even if you make 100 mistakes, movie comprehension, cultural communication, natural speech patterns. Teachers are forced to teach the test. If they spend time on real conversational French, their students would fail the official exams, or their students would go overboard with the informality, and they wouldn't learn the rules. In any case, the programs didn't teach you what you actually need for a French conversation. It's like testing driving ability with a written exam about engine mechanics instead of actual driving. Now that you're an adult and you are free from the rigid guidelines of the school systems, it's your time to start learning real everyday spoken French. For example, you can start fixing the gaps in your French education with essential everyday expressions like c'est trop chouette, for it's so cool, or ça me saoule, for I'm fed up, it's so annoying, ça me saoule, or j'ai la dalle, for I'm starving, j'ai la dalle, laisse tomber, for forget it, or even ça déchire grave. That's really, really cool. But that's more youth French. At least learn this one so you understand it. Practical communication skills as well are important. How French people actually greet each other. What French people say when they're frustrated. How French people ask questions naturally. What French people say in cafes, shops, and with friends. You should learn real pronunciation patterns as well. How sounds disappear in natural French. How words blend together. How contractions work in real life. You can also concentrate on cultural communication. How to sound natural instead of robotic. How to understand movies and TV. How to have real conversations. So, how do you fix years of miseducation caused by an outdated system? I would say that step one would be to understand it wasn't your fault or your teachers. It's okay, the education system just had to prioritize testing over actual communication. Then, bridge the gap yourself. Take the time to learn the conversational French that the curriculum missed. Step 3 would be to train your ear on real French. Stop relying on educational material. Listen to how French people actually speak. After that, practice real patterns. Learn the contractions, the drop sounds, and natural rhythms that programs ignored. Step 5 would be to embrace informal registers. Add casual French to your formal foundation instead of trying to replacing it completely. After that, learn cultural context. Understand not just what words mean, but how and when French people use them. The goal is not to abandon what you learned, it's to complete your French education with what the system left out. Let me show you how this knowledge transforms your comprehension. Remember that movie clip from earlier? Well, now you can probably understand how they're using informal French here.
T'as vu le retard qu'on a déjà?
Je t'avais dit que j'avais un truc à faire aujourd'hui.
Quel truc? Jouer à la console avec tes deux potes débiles?
Écoute, t'avais dit que j'étais pas obligé de venir.
They used informal vocabulary like un truc and les potes instead of the correct quelque chose and les amis. They dropped the ne in the negation. The boy says j'étais pas instead of the correct je n'étais pas. They also dropped the grammar structure of the question and cut the u in tu. As-tu vu, that you learned at school, becomes t'as vu, t'as vu. This is what happens when you complete your French education with what the system missed. Movies become comprehensible, conversations make sense, and France becomes accessible. Now, don't forget about your personalized weekly practice plan. If you ever use Duolingo or any other language learning app, you've got to watch this video. My conclusion might surprise you. À très vite. See you there.